Batman Arkham is a beloved video game franchise by Rocksteady Studios and WB Games, known for combining incredible stories with addictive gameplay and a beautiful open world. A once no-name studio has made a name for itself and has influenced open-world video game design ever since. This documentary will dig deeper into the development of Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Origins, and Arkham Knight. We will investigate and find out what it takes to consistently make amazing video games. My name is Troy Harrison Chriest, and this is Batman Arkham Rises.
Welcome to the madhouse, Batman!
To see how a no-name developer like Rocksteady Studios rises to video game icons, we have to go back to a simpler time, 2007. Classic video game publisher Eidos Interactive, known for projects like Deus Ex, gained the rights to make a Batman game from Warner Brothers in the spring of 2007. Eidos approached British developers Rocksteady Studios after seeing a prototype that they had made for a Batman physics engine demo. This early build had extremely detailed cape animations that would sway in the wind and move with Batman. This build won over DC Comics and Eidos Interactive. With Rocksteady signing on as the dev team for an unannounced Batman game, DC needed a writer that could adapt a comic book story arc into a 3D open world. Instead of picking someone that only wrote Batman comics, DC went after the man that wrote the best 90s show of all time, Batman the Animated Series, and his name was Paul Dini. Mr. Dini is responsible for creating the character Harley Quinn and also shaping the Mr. Freeze origin that we all know today. DC found a writer that could bring the dark tone of Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker, to a AAA video game.
I will find you, rip your flesh like paper.
Before Paul Dini came on board as writer, the team at Rocksteady knew they wanted to set this game in the sprawling open island of Arkham Asylum. Early designs show Rocksteady altering the classic comic book look of Arkham Asylum by spreading out the manor into different buildings around Arkham Island. Although being a pretty big game for the time, Rocksteady closed up a lot of the areas and made it so Batman could not get help from his long list of allies. It also let Rocksteady focus on the antagonists that they had been planning from the beginning.
Hee hee ha ha ha! Ta-da! Honey, I'm home.
Come on in.
Besides the setting, Rocksteady knew they wanted Arkham Asylum to focus heavily on the Joker, locking Batman in the insane asylum with the rest of his enemies. With a very mature story forming, Rocksteady had to find quality voice actors to bring these characters to life. This led to the obvious casting of Kevin Conroy as Batman.
You okay? He surrendered almost without a fight. I don't like it.
And Mark Hamill as the Joker. Yes, Luke Skywalker has been the Joker for 20 years, if you didn't know that yet. With Paul Dini writing, many of the actors were pulled directly from the animated series like Conroy and Hamill, but also Arlene Sorkin, the original voice of Harley Quinn. Besides the voice talent that 90s kids will have nostalgic memories hearing, the team didn't want the game to have a cartoony tone, instead pulling inspiration from Grant Morrison's graphic novel, Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious Earth.
Oh, it's always nice to return to my sweet little hacienda.
Scan initializing.
You know what? I prefer the good old cavity search. Much more personal.
Got a red
Besides
light.
comic book homage, the game's atmosphere and narrative arcs were heavily influenced by BioShock, according to producer Nathan Berlow. This spooky atmosphere carried over into the voice acting as well. After Mark Hamill saw the 3D model of the Joker that Rocksteady had created, he knew that he had to play a more menacing and evil Joker than the sometimes light-hearted Joker he was known for in the animated series.
Need to take my temperature? I'd be happy to drop my pants.
Also, with Arlene Sorkin returning to play Harley Quinn, we once again get to hear that classic 90s voice that everyone from Tara Strong to Margot Robbie have tried to duplicate ever since.
When Mr. J kills Batman, we're gonna get married. It's gonna be so cool.
Batman's design is also very unique to the Arkham games, pulling inspiration from Batman the Long Halloween, seen with the long pointy ears and flowing cape. They also didn't want Batman to have an insane amount of armor, instead using cloth in the Batsuit to make it seem like Batman is overconfident. He doesn't need armor, or at least he doesn't think so. To make Batman match the overpowering and very mature voice of Kevin Conroy, they designed Bruce Wayne as a massive man, going for an older, wiser Batman.
What? Don't you trust me?
This was the perfect choice. When you play Batman Arkham, you don't hear someone trying to do a Batman voice, you just hear Batman. Kevin Conroy is what I hear in my head when I read a Batman comic book. And the Arkham games maybe would not have done so well if they cast somebody else as the Dark Knight. I know I'm going on and on about the voice acting, but these games would have fallen apart without these voice actors. They allowed for amazing storytelling due to 100% immersion. Tremendous writing and acting led to one of the best narrative experiences in video game history. But that's enough about the cast, let's talk about development.
You took longer than I thought.
In 2007, consoles were not very powerful, so Rocksteady had to come up with a design for a Batman game that would not only satisfy fans, but be able to run on outdated hardware. This is one of the reasons Rocksteady landed on Arkham Asylum, because it allowed them to tell a good Batman story without having to design an entire living, breathing Gotham City. The gameplay dropped Batman into the asylum with just his detective skills and an assortment of gadgets to solve mysteries, beat up thugs, and most importantly, catch the Joker and stop him from blowing up Gotham City.
Oracle, go through the city's computers. Pull up all you can find on Dr. Young. I'll go through anything you find once I get to the cave.
A bat cave on Arkham Island?
I built it years ago. It's best to plan ahead for situations like this.
How'd you manage to keep this a secret?
It's me, remember?
So do you think Dr. Young's been experimenting with venom? The same chemical that turns Bane into that animal?
Yes, I'm worried. Bane seemed even more powerful than usual. Joker wants the venom, and that can only be trouble. I'm heading to Dead Man's Point in Arkham North.
This was a streamlined, linear story that had open-world elements like collectible Riddler trophies and the occasional random mob of thugs to beat up. Besides that, side quests were practically non-existent, focusing heavily on the Joker throughout the asylum and then dealing with bosses like Bane and Poison Ivy. In total, Batman Arkham Asylum was a very quick game, taking around 10 to 15 hours to beat, depending on how many mysteries and collectibles you looked for. Development began around 2007 and ended in 2009, taking in total 21 months to make the entire game. This was a very quick development cycle, considering that Rocksteady only started with 40 people and then later growing to 60 by the end of Arkham Asylum's completion. Compared to companies who can't make a good single-player game like EA, who have hundreds if not thousands of employees, Rocksteady pumped out an extremely high, polished, narrative-driven action-adventure game in 21 months, and that is just incredible for a brand new studio like Rocksteady. Apparently, the most difficult part to figure out was combat, which is crazy to think about today because that is the main thing the Batman games are known for. Extremely addicting and always fun combat. Rocksteady originally planned to have the combat as a rhythm-based hitbox system, later to be changed into a strange 2D combat mode, similar to what we know the Scarecrow hallucinations to be like.
Poor little bat, you're in my world now.
Then they were all later scrapped for the third-person punch-roll-parry system we are all too familiar with in action-adventure games today. Once they nailed down the system, Rocksteady had one of the most addicting chain combat systems for its time. Fighting was not the only difficult part of development. It apparently took one of the animators 2 years to get the flow of Batman's cape just right. In total, about 700 animations and sound effects combined into what we now know today as Batman's cape. Besides great combat and an exciting world to explore, what most people remember Batman Arkham Asylum for is the story.
Do not let him out of your sight.
There'll be time enough for you later, Cash. Speaking of time, tick-tock, tick-tock. talk. Is that a crocodile I hear? What's up, Doc? Pencil me in for tomorrow at 4. We've got a lot of catching up to do.
Keep behind me.
The plot of Arkham Asylum follows the Joker and his scheme to destroy Gotham City, while Batman is locked in Arkham Asylum with his worst enemies. This leaving Batman to beat up thugs, find clues, and eventually lead him to the Joker's supply of Bane Venom, or as Rocksteady calls it in Arkham, Titan. Joker uses this substance to transform into a super powerful Juggernaut version of himself, making it very difficult for Batman to defeat him and stop the explosions in Gotham.
What a blabbermouth! Spoiling the surprise.
Be quiet.
Oh, am I getting to you? Am I? Good.
Joker also applies the Titan formula to countless thugs throughout the game, providing enemies that actually pose a real threat to Batman. Besides the Joker storyline, Arkham Asylum had Batman face off against many of his worst enemies.
Rocco boy, is that you?
Get ready. Keep your weapons trained on it at all times.
Looks angry.
What's it doing?
I've got your scent, Batman. I will hunt you down.
Get that animal under control!
A toy collar won't stop me from killing you, Batman. I'll rip you apart, eat your bones.
Boss fights included Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, Bane, and of course, the Scarecrow hallucination sequences. Arkham Asylum had a ton of enemies to fight through, but many of Batman's rogues gallery were actually cut due to their motivations as a character not lining up with the Joker's plot. Unlike the Riddler and the Joker, Mr. Freeze doesn't care about being better at life than Batman. His motivations in the Diniverse are solely based on his wife and revenge against Wayne Enterprises, not Batman. Paul Dini didn't think Mr. Freeze would care about the Joker's plot to mess with Batman's night for 10 hours, so he was scrapped and saved for Batman Arkham City. Another villain that was scrapped from Arkham Asylum only to be saved for Arkham City is the Mad Hatter. Planned to be featured in an underground forest maze created by Poison Ivy, at the center would be the Mad Hatter having a tea party ready for Batman. This being cut because it did not fit the game's overall dark tone. Although Poison Ivy was used in Asylum as one of the best boss fights in the series' history, Mad Hatter was saved for some creepy side missions in Batman Arkham City. Other than villains, gameplay mechanics like driving the Batmobile never made it into Batman Arkham Asylum, due to it being very expensive to devote assets and time to design random driving portions that wouldn't end up actually adding anything to the story. Rocksteady didn't want to waste the already designed 90s animated theme Batmobile, so the remnants of this idea got shifted and are seen in the mission where Batman must defend the place where he parked the Batmobile, only then leading him to Commissioner Gordon's location after he finds his pipe. An immersive story and addicting gameplay led to some of the best white-knuckle moments in video game history. But gameplay and story aside, what really stands out to me is the design.
Look at all this new security. How's the guy supposed to break out of here?
Batman's character design was mostly influenced by the art of Jim Lee, this being seen in the large amount of gray they used in the Batsuit. Also, like I mentioned earlier, the Long Halloween was also a big inspiration. Also, the way Batman is depicted as a massive hulking figure that you would not want to meet in a dark alley reminds me a lot of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, except the ears, of course, look a lot like The Long Halloween, straight out of Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's The Long Halloween. The Joker looks very similar to the Killing Joke. You can see this with the crazed face and long skinny stature.
Whee! Great night for a party!
Not where you're going.
The night is young, Vance. I still have a trick or two up my sleeve. I mean, don't you think it's a little bit funny how a fire at Blackgate caused hundreds of my crew to be moved here?
Although the person who received the biggest overhaul is Harley Quinn, who looks like she robbed a nurse at Arkham Asylum and forgot to button up the shirt she stole. Another element of this game that differs greatly from comic book counterparts is Arkham Asylum itself. Rocksteady used classic Gothic imagery synonymous with Gotham architecture. But instead of doing the classic Arkham Manor converted into the Insane Asylum, they decided to spread out the different parts of the asylum and created Arkham Island. This allowed Rocksteady to spread out the gameplay to different environments around the island, creating 40 rooms, 3 exterior areas, 3 Scarecrow hallucinations, and 34 corridors in total, each area having a significantly different design theme to match the villain that Batman would be facing. For example, the medical building features Victorian-style metalwork designed to make the player feel claustrophobic and terrified of the Joker-controlled insane asylum.
At least he's back where he belongs. Get up! Now! Joker's loose. Alert the warden. Hurry! We're losing him,
The joke's on you.
In comparison, the Arkham Mansion shows a classic Gotham style used to incite the history and longevity of the Arkham family. The workflow of the design followed behind the gameplay team. First, developers would plan out the game mechanics and movement in a blank level. Then, the art team would begin designing layouts and find the tone of each environment. Then finally, the 3D team would come in, model assets, and use any textures that the art team had created and establish a working, playable world for Batman to play around in. The last step, of course, was post-processing, which for the uninformed is all the stuff that makes a game look pretty. Ambient occlusion to make the lighting on 3D objects realistic, anti-aliasing to improve pixelation on jaggy surfaces, and then finally, the lighting team comes in and adds the lens flares and realistic shadows to give the game a cinematic look. To get both a comic book feel and a realistic rendered 3D environment, Rocksteady had to decide how they wanted their game to look. Deciding to find a middle ground between cartoon and realistic, they went for overly saturated lighting and very bright colors to get the comic book tone, but then modeled and textured everything very dark and realistic with a monochromatic color scheme, combining the pretty colors of the comics with the ultra realism that we saw in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. The lighting, however, wasn't just for show. It added a way for Rocksteady to guide Batman down an otherwise dark and boring hallway. Do you remember constant TVs with the Joker's face on them? They were basically Rocksteady's way of saying, yeah, you're going the right way. 2007 was a long time ago, but Rocksteady's Arkham Asylum still looks great today because of amazing design choices early on from Rocksteady Studios. However, the one part of Asylum that doesn't hold up today is the cutscenes. Back in 2007, cutscenes needed to run in 720p 30 FPS, and they didn't have the technology to render cutscenes natively in the engine. So today, let's say you're playing Arkham Asylum on PC in 4K 60 FPS, the game will scale and look great, but those cutscenes will still be locked to that 720p resolution, a problem Rocksteady would eventually fix in later games. Even with the resolution and frame rate problems, it is impossible to skip Arkham Asylum's cutscenes due to tremendous camera work and a story that was constantly being moved forward throughout those cutscenes.
Long night, Jim.
Joker invades City Hall and holds the mayor hostage, leaving it to me to juggle SWAT teams, the media, and you. Yeah, it's been a hell of a night.
Hopefully the last one we'll ever have with him.
Yeah, right.
The story is the main reason many people around the world replay this game every year. Before Arkham Asylum was ever released, Rocksteady Studios knew they had a great game, and a story too good to not continue into another chapter. This is why 7 months before the end of Batman Arkham Asylum's development, Paul Dini began writing the ambitious sequel, Batman Arkham City. But before we get into the next game, I have to talk about the incredible success that Batman Arkham Asylum was released to. Rocksteady's Batman Arkham Asylum was released for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 on August 25th, 2009, with a delayed PC release on September 15th, 2009. Arkham Asylum won so many Game of the Year awards that it held the Guinness Book of World Records for the most critically acclaimed superhero game of all time, only to be passed by its successor in 2011. After Batman Arkham Asylum had sold 2 million copies in the first 3 weeks, DC decided to greenlight the sequel that Paul Dini had been writing for months. DC and Rocksteady began planning one of my favorite games of all time. But we will talk about that in part 2 of Batman Arkham Rises. Thank you all for watching. My name is Troy Harrison Chriest. Leave a like, share this with a friend, and hit that big red subscribe button. I will be back. I'm out of here.
On.